Vítejte. Jedna poslední věc, vím, že vás s tím strašně seru, ale omlouvám se, kvůli těm kamerám a natáčení nemůže tady být bohužel 25 dýmek, takže stvořila se tam taková dýmkarská ulička. Kdo to nebude moci vydržet, může si tam přelézt a trošičku si pufnout. Každopádně přicházejte, odcházejte, jak se vám to zlíbí. Přijala pozvání moje známá Ruth Gunning, což je jedna z členů představenstva Evropské dýmkarské asociace, která vlastně napříč Evropou i světem lobuje za co nejlepší podmínky pro vodní dýmky u lokálních vlád a také v Bruselu. Budeme se spolu bavit teďka o různých věcech, které nás čekají, co proti tomu dělat a vysvětlí nám vlastně pozadí boje za, dejme tomu, záchranu dýmek v Evropě. Tak díky moc a jdeme směle do angličtiny. So, what now? We are about to talk or what? Ruth,
you tell me.
Welcome to Czech Republic.
Thank you for having me.
No, you are for the first time here in Czech Republic?
So
or?
second time. First time I visited Prague, I was 16, so it was quite a while ago. So yeah, first visit in a long time.
And how do you like Prague so far? Or?
I mean, the weather's better. I flew from London this morning. The weather is a lot better because it was lashing rain. I mean, the city's beautiful. I loved it when I visited before. So yeah, so far so good.
Do you know something about Czech Republic in terms of hookah smoking, or is it just a surprise for you that we have, let me say it, advanced community here?
Well, you had kind of told me a little bit about it, but actually, I mean, I've only been here an hour so far and have already learned a huge amount. It's actually quite fascinating the extent to which the hookah community exists in Prague or in Czechia, but yeah, I'm quite surprised, particularly because it's predominantly native Czechs who are proponents of shisha smoking. So yeah, I'm excited actually to learn a lot more today.
I don't look like much Arab, so...
No, you don't.
Okay, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure.
I know about you that you are born in Ireland, raised in Dublin,
Yeah.
and then you gone to university to Sweden and working for BAT, British American Tobacco, and
Indeed.
right now you're educating our hookah industry in Europe.
Yes.
So, what's your story, Ruth?
So, well, I mean, you've summed it up pretty well. Often because I speak English, so and I live in London, so I just always like to make clear that I am not British. I am Irish. But yeah, I mean, so I studied law with politics in Dublin. I also studied law in Sweden. I moved to the UK to train as a barrister. And then I joined British American Tobacco, where I did predominantly intellectual property. And then I switched to government affairs or, external engagement, still with BAT, but I moved to Brussels, which is where I kind of really had to focus then on the European Union. And then I moved back to London, where I did global regulatory affairs, and then I joined what was previously known as Al-Fakr, who are now Advanced Inhalation Rituals. So I lead on European Union regulatory engagement for the company. And now I also sit as a board director for the European Shisha Community Alliance.
Is it called ESCA or ESCA, which
ESCA,
is more suitable?
ESCA, it rolls off the tongue a lot easier. So,
So what exactly stands for ESCA?
So yeah, European Shisha Community Alliance, which, I mean, we're essentially, we're a trade body, not for profit, founded by Advanced Inhalation Rituals. And we essentially give a voice to the shisha community in the European Union because up until very recently, it's a very niche sector, as I'm sure you're all very aware. But from a regulatory perspective, it's never had a voice. Hence why often, under the Tobacco Products Directive, the product is treated similarly to cigarettes with regards to the health warnings that we're subject to, etc. So ESCA was founded in order to lobby on behalf of the shisha community.
And what is your area of expertise?
So, I mean, I feel like
exactly your area of expertise.
A stretch to call myself an expert in anything, but my focus is predominantly on EU engagement. So my area of expertise is arguably on how the European Union institutions operate, politically how they work, and my focus is primarily on tobacco regulation.
So you meet with politicians and educate our industry. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what are the association goals in general?
I mean, the goals in general are, okay, like I said, to give a voice to the sector so that from a business perspective, interests are heard and understood by politicians. But also, I mean, and I'm sure you're also very aware that there's a very negative perception of shisha, not just globally, but particularly in Europe, because a lot of politicians will associate it with organized crime due to the smuggling, migrants, and then when people think of migrants, they think of illegal immigrants, and so there's a very negative perception of the sector. So one of the major goals of ESCA is to show the good side. So things like this, the Czech situation is a very good example of actually it's a very sophisticated sector if you look at it properly. So that's a big objective.
So it's not just practice, it's also public relations.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's about communicating externally just how positive the sector is. So yeah, you're right. It is PR as well.
Ruth, what led you to become a member of ESCA?
Well, because the company for whom I work founded it. But
we have a position for you.
Having worked I used to work for British American Tobacco, and the tobacco lobby is pretty strong, and for many years has had a lot of funding. They're all they form various associations. And having lived in Brussels and worked there, I do see the value of a trade association. So often politicians won't meet with individual companies, they won't meet with individual businesses, and so that's the purpose for ESCA. Like that was the reason for setting it up, was in order to be able to have a trade body that could represent the sector.
And because of your good work, you become a board member.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, look, AIR is the founding member, and so it makes sense that I would sit on it. We also have very low resources from a budgetary perspective, and so I kind of double hat. So I work for AIR, but I also work for ESCA on behalf of the sector.
What can you tell us about the members of the association? Which kind of industry players are there?
So, I mean, it's wide-ranging because we represent the entire value chain. So you have members who are shisha bloggers, to retailers, to manufacturers, to shisha lounges. So it's a wide variety of members. We have quite a large number actually of lounges, particularly in Spain, who are members.
And are they happy to be represented, or do they have some kind of, what do we need ESCA for?
Yeah, I mean, like, there is a bit of that. Most members do see the value in being part of the trade association. They see value in people coming together and working towards one goal. But there are a lot of people who, I mean, and I understand it. You have situations in Germany where they fight against things, but, you have more and more restrictions imposed. And so they think, well, what's the point? But actually, there's a lot of strength in numbers. And so the bigger the association gets, or the more people who join and support different campaigns, that's when you can actually make a difference. But it's a very slow process. And ultimately, shisha is a tobacco product, even though we consider ourselves very different to other tobacco products, but it's still tobacco, and with that comes a massive stigma. And so when it comes to, operating as a trade association, it's very difficult to get wins because, politicians, policymakers, they don't like anyone who's in tobacco. It's a very emotional feeling that they have towards the sector.
Have you ever been rejected?
Yeah.
Like politician told you, you're a tobacco representative, I don't want to speak with you.
Yeah, often. More so when I worked for BAT. I mean, there were times, I remember turning up at we had a meeting booked with a Polish MEP, and when we arrived at the door, they realised it must have been an assistant who booked the meeting. And when we arrived at the office, she said, absolutely no way am I meeting with tobacco. Like, I don't care if you have a meeting booked with me, I'm not meeting you.
So you have to be quite assertive.
Yeah, you do, but you also it's very difficult. Sometimes you take things a little personally and you have to remind yourself, okay, look, this is just about the sector. It's not about you. It's not that they don't like you. They just don't like the company you work for or the sector you work for, so.
We mentioned BAT a bit. So what differences do you see in working for a big tobacco company and now for the hookah sector?
I mean, there's a massive difference. Okay, from a regulatory perspective, it's similar in the sense that it's the same laws that apply to all of the various tobacco and nicotine products. But from a sectoral perspective, it's like chalk and cheese. BAT and Philip Morris and JTI, Imperial, they're the big four big tobacco companies. They're conglomerates. They have a lot of money. All of the revenues go towards the big corporations. Within the shisha sector, it's far less sophisticated, but in a good way. To some extent, there are certain aspects of the shisha sector which are very frustrating. But to work in, it's quite nice because it's filled with small businesses, and revenue that's generated goes towards small businesses. It doesn't go to big, massive corporations. So those are the primary differences. And then there's also the fact that when I worked for BAT, they're manufacturing products like cigarettes. It's very hard to feel passionate about cigarettes. Whereas with shisha, it's a net social good. It's a great product. It's great for people to bring people together. It has cultural ties. It's used occasionally, so it's not habitual for people. And there's the link to young entrepreneurs and innovation. So there's a hugely positive story connected to shisha. You don't get that when you work for big tobacco.
Have you ever seen some activity from the big tobacco companies against our shisha sector? Because we often tell, that there had to be the big tobacco companies, we are their, competitors, and they bash our products and they make false studies and stuff. So have you ever noticed something like that?
I mean, I don't notice anything proactive. Look, those guys, they have bigger fish to fry than to even focus on water pipe as it is defined in regulations. I mean, I do think we are collateral damage in the fight against big tobacco, and so they're very happy to throw us under the bus in order to get certain, exemptions for other products. They might focus attention on flavors for shisha, let's say, and say, well, maybe you should be tackling that before you do this. So I kind of see it more, it's more of a passive belittling of the sector as opposed to any kind of proactive lobbying against us.
Is it something from your previous work experience that you now use for the hookah industry? Yeah,
I mean, when I lived in Brussels, I obviously became very familiar with how the institutions work. That's beneficial now for this.
Of course, contacts.
Exactly, contacts. Contacts certainly in the institutions, but then even contacts amongst the industry. Sharing of information is hugely important when you're lobbying. Even if, I don't like to align the association with any other tobacco associations because certainly not externally or formally, because I don't like anyone to consider that cigarettes are similar to shisha. But informally, I do liaise a lot with the tobacco sector because, like I said, sharing of information is hugely important. I also work a lot with the cigar manufacturers because they have a very similar product in that it's niche, it's enjoyed occasionally, often they want to smoke it indoors. But I guess, anything I learned when I was in BAT is hugely transferable.
It's valuable.
Yeah, definitely. And also, the very important thing is I have a very good understanding of the power of the anti-tobacco lobby. So the NGOs that are in Brussels. When I lived in Brussels, we estimated there were about 20 NGOs whose primary focus was to end the tobacco sector in its entirety, and that includes shisha.
How powerful are they, and what exactly stands for NGO?
So non-governmental organizations, so they're independent organizations from government, but often are funded by government, or, you have the Michael Bloombergs of the world, Bill Gates, they are all very supportive of the World Health Organization. You've got No Fumadores, who are a Spanish organization. They have a citizens initiative at the moment to bring forward the tobacco-free Europe from 2040 to 2030. You have the European Network of Smoking Prevention, who are now actually working on the review of the Tobacco Products Directive, even though they're an NGO, so should have absolutely nothing to do with it. But so I very much understand they're extremely powerful, they're extremely well organized, and they have huge support from government officials. And they have a very easy way in when it comes to meeting politicians because they're, not-for-profit organizations defending public health.
Is that something we are about to achieve in the future, or it's just a closed door for us? to be better organized,
Yeah.
a massive amount of association, open doors with politicians. This could be our future, or we are biased from the very beginning?
I think look, I think we can definitely be more organized, and that will happen over time. I mean, ESCA is arguably in its infancy. We've only been around for 2 years now. So over time, yeah, I think we can definitely become more organized.
That's the goal.
Yeah, exactly. Open doors to politicians, I mean, that's a real ideal scenario. I don't know if that's really realistic, but definitely, I mean, if we are successful in distinguishing the shisha sector from traditional tobacco, cleaning up the image of the sector, then I don't see why we shouldn't have a more open door to politicians. But I mean, like I said, that's an ideal scenario. If we can just become more organized, I'd be happy.
I would agree.
Yeah.
You're not currently smoking, but
No.
please describe to me your first ever hookah experience.
Okay, so my first hookah experience actually was quite a while ago. It was in Portugal on holiday, and to be honest, I knew nothing about the product. I kind of was in a lounge and decided to smoke a shisha. It actually was alfakir and it was blueberry. So maybe it was fate that I,
ended up working
for them ultimately. But since then, I kind of have become a bit more au fait with the product, and I would say now, like my favorite flavor, for example, would be watermelon. Although I do quite like double apple, which is, I guess, maybe unusual because I feel like that's got
love it or hate it relationship with this kind
but
of
I
flavor.
like the aniseed taste, so so I do quite like it. But my preference would be watermelon. Alfakir, of course.
And right now, are you passionate about hookahs, or is it just part of your job now?
No, I mean, look, I had my first experience, like I said, was pre-working for the sector. Having joined the sector now, I would smoke shisha quite frequently. Particularly, if you go to meetings in Germany or something with distributors, etc., there's always a shisha in the middle of the table. So yeah, now I mean, I'm definitely not an expert like all of you guys here, but I do really enjoy it. I think it's great for relaxing, for sitting around with friends. So
that's the thing we love about hookahs.
Yeah, it's so nice.
Let's speak about hookahs in Europe.
Yes.
From my point of view, I think it's a story of misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And let's begin with, what do you believe are the biggest challenges or issues facing the hookah industry in Europe, and how do you plan to address them as an association?
Okay, well, I mean, there's a lot of issues lots of challenges actually facing the sector.
Let's say 5.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the one big one is the black market in Europe is particularly bad. I mean, we are the most impacted tobacco product by black market activity in Europe. We estimate it's around 52% of black market here. In Czechia, I think I was speaking earlier, it's roughly, 60-70. In France, 95% of the market. UK is around 95% black as well. So that's a massive problem because that's the biggest competitor. So, you've got smuggled product, yes, but then you also have counterfeit product, which from a brand equity perspective is hugely detrimental because people don't know what they're smoking and then they might hate it, but it's actually not real product. But then also from a public health perspective, you've got people smoking something and you don't even know what's in it, or it's not necessarily regulated by EU laws. So it's somewhat counterintuitive. But linked to that then is the massive problem of excises in Europe. So taxation on shisha is huge, which drives the black market. That's a massive challenge as well. And
I think the politicians don't get it because they speak about a massive black market portion, but the taxes are always high.
Yeah, I know.
This exact fact supports the black market. So.
Yeah, of course. It completely facilitates it. And, you say to them, well, if you reduced taxes, you would actually get more in the long run. But because it's tobacco, you're in most instances never going to see a politician advocate for lower taxes on tobacco because it's just not popular. I mean, we want to fight for a situation where you're taxing on the basis of the weight of the tobacco only, not the entire molasses, which makes sense, but unfortunately they interpret the law as being, if it's smokable, it's taxable. And so that's the reason for the excise being applied to the entire product. But yeah, they don't understand that actually if they were to do the reverse, it would be a lot more beneficial.
So we have two. We have black market.
Black market, taxation. I would say the sector's image is a huge challenge because I think, like I mentioned this, you've got links to organized crime, you've got links to migration, and with growing xenophobia in Europe, if people associate a particular product with a particular group of people and they don't want them there, then they view it as something that's bad.
We are often told junkies.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, the link to drugs, cannabis, because, you've got bongs and then you have water pipes and people associate the two. Cannabis is currently illegal, whereas shisha is not illegal. So there is the negative perception that's associated with that. And then there's this consideration that it's smoked by children, which is bizarre to me because, I don't know what child can pack a hookah bowl, but I'd be impressed if they can. You can't conceal it like you can with a vaping device or a cigarette. So that's a massive challenge, is the cleaning up of the sector from an image perspective.
We have last two.
Okay, two more. One which is the flavors. Flavors obviously are hugely important to the sector. And I guess we'll talk about it a bit later about this, the threat of a flavor ban in Europe, but flavors are fundamental to the sustainability of the shisha category. And so if there is any real threat to them, that's a massive challenge for us because it's about educating politicians to understand what shisha is, why it is a good product, and why if you remove flavors, you will exacerbate an already growing black market problem, which has an extremely sophisticated supply chain. Okay, and then the fifth one. I think this is a big challenge that we face as a sector, which is childlike imagery on packaging. I said that, a lot of politicians kind of focus on shisha as being attractive to minors. And on one hand, I can actually understand why they think that to an extent, because a lot of the packaging that is sold, there are various brands in Europe who sell shisha, and their packaging has cartoon imagery on it. That's not acceptable for a tobacco product. It's a product that should be consumed for over 18s. Most over 18s people do not, they might enjoy cartoons or whatever, but
also, it's connected with the rappers.
Yeah, or connect. Yeah, exactly. So, and I don't mind a connection with rappers at all, but it's how you market the product. And if you're using overtly colorful packaging or childlike imagery, I really can't see a benefit in that for the sector as a whole. Yeah, okay, maybe it advances your product to an extent, but I think a lot of players don't think holistically about things, and they are focused on themselves and not actually the longer term sustainability of the sector. So I think that's a massive challenge for us to clean ourselves up in that respect, but also try to distract politicians from looking at that aspect of the sector.
Thank you so much, Ruth.
No problem.
I would add two more.
Yeah, go on.
Which is indoor smoking bans.
Yeah.
And then banning of online sale of tobacco.
Yeah, they're massive challenges as well. The problem with the online selling of tobacco and also the indoor smoking bans, the focus there is just not exposing people to secondhand smoke, and then also restricting people's access to tobacco. So they're not necessarily shisha specific. So that's where we get caught as the collateral damage in the fight against big tobacco, because people are thinking tobacco, they think, cigarettes, ban all indoor smoking, ban smoking on terraces. And then unless someone's there to fight for the shisha sector specifically, then we get caught up in that.
In Czech Republic, this is one of our biggest accomplishments, because we have an exemption from the indoor ban smoking.
No, I know, and I'm using that at the moment for lobbying in Spain to try and achieve something similar.
Oh, we are useful.
Yeah. The golden child of indoor smoking.
Okay, let's talk about the regulations. I know it's maybe a little bit complicated, but let's put it maybe more simpler for the people.
Sure.
So let's talk about three legislation things. We have TED, TPD, and track and trace.
Yeah.
Please, let's briefly summarize what they are all about.
Okay, so I'll try not to bore you all about regulation. I find it fascinating, but I completely understand that most people don't. Look, track and trace is a traceability system for tobacco products. It was adopted back in 2016. It applies to cigarettes and fine cut, or like roll your own, since May of 2019. It will now apply to shisha from May 2024, and also cigars and cigarillos. It's essentially a way of them being able to trace legal product throughout Europe. They argue that it will help to suppress the black market. I don't think that's true. I mean, it hasn't helped with cigarettes, certainly, and it's been around now for 4 years. But what it does do is it imposes huge financial obligations on companies in order to be able to apply it. So certainly for the shisha sector, a lot of small businesses will have to close as a result of having to apply this because it's just too expensive for them to run.
So from my point of view, a producer of tobacco have a pack with, for example, QR code, which will be scanned.
Yeah.
Then it will be scanned again when it arrives to the destination country.
Yeah.
And then again with the distributor, and then again when they sell it.
Yeah.
So you are just always scanning. QR codes, and it's time wasting, it's expensive. And these costs will be applied for customers, of course.
Yeah. Look, it ultimately gets passed on to the end consumer. But in order to actually even implement the processes and the machinery required for the packaging, manufacturers have to invest a huge amount, like a few million. So if you're a small business, I mean, that's out of the question.
So this will be active
May next year.
Next year.
Yeah.
And we can do nothing about it.
No. So that's
It's
all.
settled.
It's agreed, signed, sealed, delivered. It's done. Yeah.
Okay. Well.
Yeah. So there. There's not much I can do on that front.
Okay. Track and trace.
So that was track and trace. So Tobacco Excise Directive, definitely the least sexy of the legislation. Look, that just sets the minimum rates for taxes for tobacco in Europe. It is currently under review. The Commission proposal actually was leaked last year, and we saw that there was a separate category for shisha, which is what we want because it allows us to get a better understanding of the legal market and also allows us to lobby then at national level for lower taxes for the category. So we saw that that is in it. We also saw that there is an increase, of course, in the minimum rates, but when you do the math, it shouldn't actually impact the price currently because, like I said, it sets the minimum rate, so governments then apply higher rates on top of that. Taxation is a tricky one because it's mainly a national competence. So the European Union can set minimum rates, but actually when it comes to matters of taxes, national governments actually have a lot more say. So from a lobbying perspective, more work can be done at local level as opposed to in Brussels. So, but anyway, there's a lot of contention over the file. The tax department own the Tobacco Excise Directive file, but the health department have some say. They approved it previously, and then they had a lot of lobbying from NGOs who saw the content of the text. They didn't think it went far enough. And so they have withdrawn their support, and now there's fighting in Brussels, and there's a delay to it. Look, but a delay is good because a delay means a delay to implementation, and then, so that's the excise directive.
And what about TPD? That's something a few people in Czech Republic knows about.
Yeah, so this is the piece of legislation that regulates all tobacco and nicotine products currently in Europe. When you have a directive, it applies automatically. It sets a standard across the EU. All national governments have to transpose it into their national laws. So this regulates, this is why we have the combined health warnings on the packs. This is why we can't use certain ingredients. This is why, there are, restrictions to cross-border sales. It regulates e-cigarettes as well. So the TPD, it also provides for an exemption for flavors for the shisha category. So actually, it's not the worst piece of legislation currently when I think of what could be, but it affords us that exemption for flavors. only if there's not what's considered a substantial change in circumstances to the growth of the category. So it has to stay below 2.5% of overall tobacco consumption in Europe, which sounds like very little, but actually the shisha sector is so small, the legal market actually only represents about 0.7% of overall tobacco consumption. So we're far away. Yeah, but that's legal. So like I said, if you've got 52% is illegal, so you double that. So it's actually, in a way, the black market has helped us to retain the exemption. But my fear is that they'll change the thresholds that are required to remove the exemption. But you saw, with IQOS, the heated tobacco, they lost their flavour exemption recently because of the growth of the market. They reached 3.33% or something.
Okay, so our only chance is to stay below?
No. Well, it's a chance, but they could change that threshold and they could say, okay, we're going to drop it to, 1%, which would mean we're very close to reaching it. So if you have sector growth, which we are in Europe for shisha, then, whilst it's a good thing for us, it's a bad thing with respect to a flavour ban.
Okay, so stay low.
Stay low, stay under the radar, but stay legal.
As an association, are you able to cooperate with local government and lobby for the sake of, for example, lower tobacco taxes or protecting hookah businesses in member states?
I mean, look, in theory, yes. But like I said, ESCA is very low resourced. So my main focus is Brussels, because that has the wider impact. Spain, because one of the bigger shisha markets, and then Germany. I work very closely with the German Shisha Association, and we're also a member of that group as well. So, and Germany obviously is the biggest shisha market. So, yes, we lobby with local governments. Whether they are open to it or not can vary, and then I provide support to smaller markets as and when they need. But it's more so, it's more a question of them asking for help, which often people don't.
And what's the process? You are searching for the local European Parliament members and then contact them and, hey, this is the situation in, for example, Czech Republic, and we are representing hookah industry also in Czech Republic, so we want to give you some arguments and stuff. That's the drill? Yeah,
well, so, yeah, I mean, with... So I lobby specifically for Spain. I would meet with Spanish politicians, local MPs. I have met with members of the European Parliament as well. The thing with meeting with members of the European Parliament is they are more focused on stuff coming from Brussels. So if it's a local issue, you're better off actually focusing on the local politicians. And it's the same in Germany. It would be members of the Bundestag as well that we would meet with. But yeah, I mean, if there's an issue in a particular country, then it's a lot easier. I mean, it depends on the country. I may not have contacts to someone who has contacts it's all about network, really, when it comes to lobbying.
And which party can we find the most supporters? Left wing, right wing, centric?
So, it again, depends on country. Yeah. I find that the narrative sits better with the left, because if they're too right, they associate shisha with migrants, and often in the right they don't like migrants. With the left, they're a lot more sympathetic towards, the cultural argument. Centrists understand the small business argument, or slightly centre right will understand less government intervention. So, according to where they sit on the political spectrum, you can tailor it accordingly. Yeah, it was a funny moment when you asked me, who is this woman in the parliament? She's for the Communist Party, so she's left, so she's okay. And I was like, no, she's really not okay. Yeah, you see, you also need the local advice as well, because, sometimes they may have a particularly bad reputation in, their country of origin, so it's always good to get insights like that.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, let's talk about Germany.
Yes.
There is an active ban of menthol, and recently we have our problem with 25-gram packaging. So what's the story behind these arguments, and could we expect other countries to adopt it?
I mean, look, the reason for menthol ban in Germany, or they have a negative list, so it's
it's
menthol
like
and any
40
variant thereof. So
chemicals.
anything that could even give a kind of a menthol flavor is banned. The reason for that is, again, an absence of a voice for the shisha sector. That was originally intended for cigarettes, because there is a blanket menthol ban for cigarettes all across Europe. The German government extended that to all tobacco products. But the justification for banning menthol is that it facilitates inhalation and it facilitates nicotine uptake. So they do have scientific data to support that justification. That has already happened now in a number of other countries, in that, you know, you have Denmark, Finland, I think Latvia, Estonia, the Netherlands, from the top of my head as well. So you have a number of other countries Austria, who've banned menthol or linalool, which is like a naturally occurring oil. So yeah, it will happen everywhere. I think a menthol ban across the EU is an inevitability for the Tobacco Products Directive. The 25 gram restriction, yeah, I could see that. Look, Germany are extremely powerful. So anything Germany does, Brussels will look at. So there's a very high chance that they could bring a 25 gram restriction. The only thing I will say about the 25 gram restriction is that the reason they're not reversing it is more political, as opposed to, I think a lot of the politicians in Germany understand that it's been a complete, I'm not going to use a bad word here, but they've messed it up. So it's more political. The Scholz, who's the German chancellor, was the minister for finance at the time, and they introduced the 25 gram restriction. Now, because he's chancellor, it would be politically detrimental to a lot of people if they were to then push back on something that he had originally introduced. So it's a bit nuanced, but I see it as a risk that it could spread.
Look, Ruth, you're an expert. I'm struggling with what's the best approach, for example, in Czech Republic, to stay low, to not speak with politicians and enjoy that we are under the radar, or just to present our culture to the widest range of people and just spread the hookah culture nationwide. I'm really struggling with that, because when I do the second thing, politicians maybe start looking into shisha like, okay, they are growing, they are smoking, okay, let's do something about it. When we just stay low, we can even go bigger.
No, I know. It is. It's hard to figure out what kind of a balance you should take. I think, I mean, when you look at like big tobacco, they very much stay under the radar, and that was always the approach. That was the approach I had to take when I lobbied for them. If you stay under the radar, then maybe no one will notice you. I think for shisha, there's a real danger that's when you do get caught as collateral damage in the fight against bigger tobacco. So I do see huge value in educating politicians about the nature of the sector, the benefits of the sector, because I said this earlier, shisha is a net social good. It is a really positive product. It's extremely social. And so I find that if people understand the product and they understand the sector, they understand the businesses involved, it's very hard for them to have a negative perception of it. And yeah, okay, it's a tobacco product, but it's like 20% of it is tobacco, you know, and it's way lower down on the risk continuum from a health perspective. So I definitely think if you have the time and the resources to be able to lobby with your politicians here, I would definitely encourage you to do it. And we can give whatever support you need.
Thank you. Speaking about politicians, what problem do you encounter with politicians? Are they, let's say, well or bad informed on the matter?
I would say most maybe smoked a shisha on holiday. They don't really understand the sector at all. Often you get, oh, but I heard it's as bad as smoking 100 cigarettes.
And it's for marijuana.
Yeah. So exactly, So I used to think it was like cannabis. Lots of myths that are, and that's the benefit of meeting with these guys, is because you correct these things. Look, certainly in Germany, we don't experience major pushback. Of course, it depends on the politicians you're reaching out to, but on average, they're pretty open to having a discussion with industry. Spain, more often than not, very open to having a discussion. We have the benefit of shisha, of being a bit more palatable for politicians from an engagement perspective, because we're the small guys. You know, we do have good arguments in favor of the sector. So. It's not closed doors always, but sometimes you just need to kind of bang a little bit harder, but you can eventually get through.
And what are the association's key arguments speaking with politicians?
So, I mean, look, we do use the cultural argument because a large proportion of consumers are from a migration background in Europe.
But the positive side of the
yeah. I mean, look, with culture comes integration. So these people bring something from their culture to Europe, which is embraced and allows people to integrate properly. It allows migrants to set businesses up and contribute to society in countries where they may not have any other kind of skill set in order to be able to adapt to local culture.
What a great spin.
No, but that's the thing. I mean, it's not even necessarily. I mean, yeah, okay, you could argue it's spin, but it's also fact, you know.
Yeah,
and
it is.
So using the cultural argument is very important. It's also the fact that, you know, you would never see Western politicians restrict certain flavors for alcohol. Now I say that, but you probably will start to see that because it's turning into a nanny state. But you would rarely see any politician attempt to restrict flavors for alcohol. This is the equivalent for a lot of migrant communities. So the cultural argument is very important. It's a social product. Again, it's the net social good. It brings people together, families, friends. It's also occasional. And so from the health perspective, you know, on average, I think in Germany, it's 2 to 3 times a week people smoke a shisha. In the US, it's 1 to 2 times a month. So it's not like, you know, going outside for a cigarette and getting your quick nicotine.
It's not a
hit.
quick option.
No, it's not. And that's like the whole ritual of packing a bowl and choosing your flavors. Like, that's the enjoyable part as well. So those are the black market argument is also one that we use more so in relation to taxation. But also, if you over-regulate a product, you will drive people to black market products. So if flavors are restricted, people will still consume shisha, but they'll just find it somewhere else, you know?
Yeah.
So those are the kind of main arguments that are used.
And are your arguments supported by data? If so, how do you collect them and what kind of data?
I mean, it's very difficult to get good data for shisha because of the nature of the sector, because it's so niche, and also because only half of what's consumed is actually legal. So it's very difficult to get holistic data. Europe has some good data in terms of incidence rates, so consumption patterns, called a Eurobarometer, which they publish every few years. It's their attempt to show that younger people are smoking, et cetera, but actually their data shows very much that shisha is an occasionally consumed product, which is great. We have ESCA commissioned a study with Kantar to debust the myth that shisha consumption is a gateway to smoking, which it successfully did. It also showed that it's a social product. That's the primary reason people smoke it. And then, like I mentioned, the 2 to 3 times a week in Germany, that's based on the German Federal Risk Institute data. And there's some studies from the CDC in the US as well in terms of the occasional nature. So there's a few bits. There's scientific evidence as well in terms of the aerosol that's produced, debusting the myths about the 100 to 50 cigarettes equivalents. So we do have data, but it's limited to an extent.
And when you when you're speaking with politicians,
I argue sometimes as well.
Are they more interested in data or in your arguments? Like, show me the graph.
No,
show me the numbers.
no. The arguments, the arguments are usually enough. I mean, they'll sometimes say, oh, send me any kind of supporting evidence you have, if they need to kind of justify advocating for something in particular. And anyway, after a meeting, I would always just send any studies or whatever that I reference. But more often than not, if you give them a compelling story, that's enough for them.
Yeah, so stories.
Yeah, and it's less for them to have to read. Nobody wants to read documents that come through with data in it, you know. So if I can kind of summarize it quickly and have a reference, maybe that's usually enough.
For example, when you go to politicians, do you also bring hookah as well?
No, I don't. but I have considered.
Let's smoke it. You will see. Is no harm.
No, I have considered it, but I don't. I think they probably kick me out. So we actually had an event in the Bundestag last year, which was a hookah event, and invited, so a lot of the liberal members of the German Bundestag are quite supportive of the shisha sector, so they helped to organise it. And we had people from the Ministry of Finance attending, and that was in relation to 25-gram restriction. So we're still lobbying on that, even though it's obviously in place, but yeah, so it's more if we can have a shisha event and invite politicians to do that. I mean, ideally, I would love to have one in Brussels. And maybe when it comes to the lobbying part of the TPD review process.
Let's make a hookah party.
Yeah, a hookah party would be great. But like that's exactly what you can do here in Prague, is have an event here and invite politicians to actually understand the sector.
I will give you an example, because last month our senators had to try nicotine pouches, and after that they were like, okay, we ban it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, well that's different, because I don't know if anyone here has tried a nicotine pouch before, but if you're not used to nicotine,
it kicks you.
Oh my God, like you're dizzy, even the lower dosage. So
yeah, we call it a buzz effect.
Yeah, that's exactly what. But it's an intense impact. So, I mean, it's stupid for them to ban it, but that's another discussion.
No, it was not about the clear ban, but it was about restrictions
Flavors.
For kids.
Okay.
Because right now it's
there's
really unregulated.
Because it's not regulated. Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
fine. I get that. I get restricting it to over 18s, but as a almost no risk product.
That's not the kind of a party we want to make in
No.
the future for politicians.
No, but I think if you invited politicians to something like this, it would be excellent.
Okay, so let's hope for the future.
Yeah.
Okay, we speak about politicians and their perceptions of hookah. What about general citizens of Europe, hookah's perception? Do you think it's getting better, or is it still full of myths and disinterpretation? Because, for example, I think the media doesn't do a good job with presenting our hookah culture because of the myths. And we have often in Czech Republic that yes, smoking hookah is bad because it's like 100 cigarettes, and one particular news, a group of scholars smoking hookah in a mushroom-shaped building on the ground.
Oh wow! Okay.
It was like in the local news.
Okay.
And firefighters go
yeah,
there.
of course. Yeah, I mean, look, it's the same. Like if you Google shisha lounges Germany, you'll like more often than not get something about the police raiding and bringing out the workers there, or so it's all. I mean, the perception is hugely negative. That is perpetuated by the media. So one of the things that we try to do certainly in Germany,
it's like the sensationalism.
Yeah, it's completely these headlines, and people love to see it.
Yeah.
You know, they lap it up. So. That's why one of the objectives of the association is to try to clear up that image. So we do work with journalists to try to have positive messaging out there. I mean, we did an article with Le Monde at one point about the shisha sector in France to try to highlight the issues that were impacting.
Great.
Yeah, which is obviously a great news outlet. I mean, it doesn't happen often that we get with these guys, but sometimes you can get a good journalist. In Germany, we've had a few articles that the local Shisha Verband promote and work with them to try and give a better, you know, we acknowledge that there's an issue with lounges often, particularly in Germany, but that there is a legal side to the sector, and you know it's often an enforcement issue. And
you know, in Czech Republic it's funny because our most most popular news about hookah industry is we found a smuggler in the Prague airport with 25 kilograms of tobacco, and then when they finally speak something good about our sector, they often misspelled our names.
Yeah.
It was, for example, an article about Ostrava, third largest city, and their hookah and its hookah scene, and like 1/3 of the owners was misspelled with names.
Yeah, that's just so frustrating. But it's that just doesn't surprise me.
Some of them are sitting here right now.
But that's the thing. So like, no one wants to hear the good stories about shisha. They want to hear the bad stuff. People love bad news.
That's the sensationalism.
You know. So I think look, it's a matter. It's going to be a very slow process. But I think that's something that the association is working towards. It's just, often you're firefighting. I find I'm distracted by trying to deal with other things. That in an ideal situation, you'd have people consistently working on the PR narrative for the sector, which we will get to at some point. It's just going to be slow.
So a lot of press releases pushing it.
Yeah, I mean, we did in Spain. It was during COVID, so it was a little bit difficult. But we did do a briefing with journalists. Where we sent them, we couldn't send them tobacco because you're not allowed in Spain. So we sent them a hookah, we sent them a pipe, we sent them gin and tonics, and we told them to go to their local SHANTI Co and buy some shisha. And then they sat, and we had to do it all online. And, I presented to them on the shisha sector in Spain and in Europe, the challenges. But so that's kind of the little attempts that we can make to try to improve the image of the sector.
Okay, so we send hookah to every journalist in our country, and
let's
deal with it.
I actually think shisha's it's a really cool product. So I don't see why the likes of Tatler and Vogue wouldn't be doing bios on shisha entrepreneurs or the shisha lounges in a particular city. Like, that's quite cool. So I don't see why we couldn't get to a point where we're doing stuff like that.
So maybe in the future.
Yeah, a very bright future.
Ruth, as an expert, what do you think sets hookah apart from other tobacco products? We mentioned several things before, but let's put it all together. Which sets hookah from other tobacco products? Okay,
well, I mean, just by its very nature, the consumption, and no other product requires this much time and preparation. Like, it does take about 20 minutes to properly set it all up, have the coals heated, etc. That in itself obviously differentiates it. The health risk that's associated with shisha consumption is far lower than any other tobacco product. I mean, by virtue of the fact that there's such a low tobacco content, and then the frequency at which you smoke it. And then I guess like I know people go out to smoking areas and they have a cigarette, but it's because they're properly addicted to it. They need to get it done.
You're not able to see people with hookah on that booth on the airport.
No, you're not. Booth. No, you're not. There's no shisha smoking booths. Although, I guess you would be allowed, right?
If
you were stuck in the airport for a few hours.
We wanted to do it, but it's not easy to set hookah up.
It'd be a good idea, actually, a shisha lounge in an airport. So yeah, it's the ritual of consuming shisha. I did say, like, I would compare it a little bit to cigars, just because that's more of a social thing. People sit around and enjoy it, but then you also have the flavor aspect. It's like the mixology that's involved with shisha and is extremely unique as well. So I think, and it's the sector itself, it's the grassroots movement that exists within shisha. People are passionate about the product. Nobody's passionate about a cigarette. I mean, for their fix of nicotine, fine, but they're not. Most people have a negative relationship with the cigarette. They want to quit. You very often, you infrequently meet someone who says, I love smoking and I want to continue. You do meet them, but more often than not, they have a negative relationship. Most people who smoke shisha enjoy shisha and they want to continue smoking shisha.
For example, in Czech Republic, and I think it's in more countries, when you go to a facility and you communicate with the waiter or with the staff, you and the staff will create the hookah. They ask you, what do you like, what flavor, what strength and everything, and you develop your order when you're speaking with the waiter. It's not like in a restaurant when you have the menu, okay, I have this.
Yeah, exactly. You don't even do it when you're with a cocktail. Cocktails are they're prescribed, you select, they make it. Okay, it's like the mixology is similar to a cocktail maker, but there's a lot more engagement between a shisha smoker and the waiter than there is with any even alcoholic product. Yeah.
Okay, to sum this up, what stands behind all those regulations? I would name some things.
Yeah.
Okay, big tobacco industry, health concerns, the level of young people currently smoking, incompetence of politicians catching up with new products on the market,
Yeah.
lower tax collection, the Smoke-Free Europe 2040 initiative, and so on.
Yeah.
So what do you think stands behind all those regulations?
I mean, I think most of the things that you mentioned are behind
It's a
those.
combination.
Yeah, it is a combination. I mean, look, with tobacco, there's a very negative history linked to tobacco. I don't know if any of you are familiar with, the court cases in the US where there was, where you had the CEOs of the big tobacco companies standing and saying, no, cigarettes are not addictive, and they swore under oath even though they had science clearly stating the opposite. So that image of tobacco has stayed for, decades. And it'll be very hard for them to shift that. They're facing, and that's why you don't have access to a lot of politicians, because of that history. Mm-hmm. Big tobacco is considered, sneaky, and they lie, and they're always using science as a way, their own funded science to get around certain regulations, etc. And that's why the harm reduction debate that they are perpetuating, even though it's very true, it's not necessarily believed by politicians because they say, oh, it's coming from big tobacco. That's definitely a reason for these regulations. Yeah, public health. I understand why politicians... I do think tobacco products should be regulated to an extent. But when you get to the tipping point whereby you are creating an incentive for people to sell and purchase black product, that's when the regulations stop working. So achieving that balance, I think, was lost a long, long time ago. And this, these health warnings, people are immune to them. Most people don't even look at the health warning anymore. It's about educating people, but they don't see that. People need to be free to make their own choices based on the information that's available to them. So I do understand the public health argument, but to an extent. And yeah, look, Europe is working towards a tobacco-free Europe by 2040. Tobacco-free means 5% incidence rate, which is actually what Sweden has. Sweden has a 5% tobacco consumption smoking rate, because obviously snus is so prevalent there. And so that's the ideal. But with that tobacco, free Europe to 2040 comes also the removal of shisha in that. And that is their ambition. So that's why all of these regulations are going to be proposed in order to ultimately achieve that goal. But when they say a tobacco-free Europe, they're talking about legal tobacco. The illegal stuff will still be available. And so you don't have a tobacco-free Europe. They just have something that they can hang their hat on. So politically, it looks good.
Yeah, but what about, for example, tax collection? Okay.
Yeah, but this is the thing. This argument is made all the time, and often governments will say, we don't care. We don't care that there's less taxes. We just want public health objectives achieved. And governments will always find a way to justify their policies. You will very rarely get a government that says, oh, sorry, guys, we messed up.
So right now, we are really devastated with your news. So let's fight for the future of the hookah industry.
Yeah.
My question is, how could all these regulation and issues impact hookah consumers and businesses?
I mean, look, if you have a product that's over-regulated to the extent that you can't sell something with flavors that are liked by consumers, or you over-regulate a product to the extent that the black market can supply what you cannot, then businesses are destroyed, because a lot of people want to have a legal business. It's the stress involved in having to have illegal product or illegal sales. It's a lot easier. Most people want to operate in a legal manner, but it's for governments to be able to facilitate that. And with these regulations, effectively banning, they do act as a de facto ban on a product, means then businesses can't sell. If you can't sell, flavored shisha, let's say, well then, what's the point in even having the water pipes? So everything's linked. Lounges then can't sell a product that people want to consume. So it has a chain effect, and so that's the direct impact on consumers and on businesses. And then there's the public health argument. Consumers will be accessing product and they don't know what's in it. So for them, it's worse.
But they don't ask them.
No.
Okay, let's talk about current affairs. The EU has launched a public consultation which will impact hookahs and probably ban flavors. What does the community need to do to protect our beloved hookahs, and what happens if we lose?
Okay, well, this is all coming at a very opportune time because, so yeah, I guess most of you will know anyway, from Jakub posting about it as well. So the Tobacco Products Directive is currently under review as part of the wider tobacco control framework. And they haven't explicitly said it in the public consultation that they have launched, but there will be a proposal to ban flavours. They've stated that in their objectives for Tobacco-Free Europe for 2040. So this is their opportunity to do it. And they've mentioned, you know, Finland and Denmark, the governments previously tried to ban flavours for shisha. Member states cannot ban flavours for shisha unilaterally. It has to be done at Brussels level for now. But what the Commission said to the governments when they tried to ban was, you can't do this, but don't worry, we'll do it when we review the TPD. So,
like, wait for it.
Yeah, exactly. Just be patient. So it's an inevitability that it's going to come at some point in terms of a proposal. That doesn't mean that it's going to happen, but there's a high risk, a very, very high risk that it could if we don't act. So
how to act?
Pardon?
So how to act?
So how to act. So the Commission will propose something. But before that, they have this, what's called the public consultation, which is currently open. So this is why we have this Save Our Shisha campaign. There will be lots of things that are proposed for all of the products under the TPD. There may also be plain packaging proposed for shisha. I'm not that concerned about that. My concern is flavours, because flavours ultimately are the most important thing for the category. So for the Save Our Shisha campaign, what we want is maximum people across the world, because you can respond as a non-EU citizen as well. So people and businesses to respond to the public consultation, which unfortunately is quite a long questionnaire. The website isn't particularly mobile friendly either. They do all of this on purpose to deter people from responding. But if there is a good and strong voice from the shisha sector, there's a higher chance that they won't propose a flavour ban. If they do still propose a flavour ban, there are more intervention points. So that's when I will lobby the European Parliament. I will also lobby the Spanish governments and the German governments. I will, rely on you also to help with lobbying the Czech government and then other ESCA members throughout Europe, and point to the response in the public consultation and say, look, however many thousand, I hope, shisha consumers want to defend their product, they have businesses. If you impose a flavour ban, that's destroyed. So we need those responses to be able to point to say, look, there is a strong voice in the sector and you can't just ignore it.
And not only as the hookah citizens, European citizens, but as businesses.
Yeah, so you
can fill it as a business.
Exactly. So there are 7 different questionnaires. So you select how you want to respond, either as an EU citizen or a business, or there's others like NGOs, etc., or trade associations that ESCA will respond as. And so if you're a business, you respond as a business. I think there's 27 questions. And then as an EU citizen, there's 21 questions. If you have a business, I urge you to respond both as a business and as an individual, because every response will count. And we have a webpage, saveourshisha.eu. It's not the most sophisticated of websites, but again, low resources, so I had to work with what I could. Yeah, it works, and that's the main thing. But there's guidance on there, because a lot of people, the questions are really not great. So people may not know how to respond to them, but you have to respond to them in order to submit a response. The most important part is that there's a section at the end where you can give arguments about shisha, or you can attach a document. So that's the most important part. But you do have to answer all of the questions. So there's guidance on how to answer them if you want them, or you can just respond as you wish. And so the guidance we provide is responding as an EU citizen or responding as a business.
I can name a few supporting arguments from the ESCA. Let's say flavors are fundamental to the sustainability of the shisha category. Mm-hmm. Restricting flavors for shisha would be like restricting flavors for alcohol. Mm-hmm. Shisha is a uniquely cultural product. Shisha is primarily consumed by those from a migration background. Shisha is a social product. For many who do not consume alcohol for cultural or religious reasons, it's a social outlet, much like alcohol consumption is a social outlet for Westerners. Shisha is an occasional product. Shisha is completely different to traditional tobacco products and must be protected. Further restrictions will increase the black market. If flavors are restricted, the businesses will close and people will lose their jobs. The shisha sector is full of small and medium-sized businesses, and a lot are family-run. Shisha brings people together, different nationalities, friends and families. Up now, devastating impact of COVID already, and shisha is primarily consumed by those from the migration background.
Look, migration, I guess you're not going to really use it for if you're Czech, but in a lot of countries you can use it. And you know, it works with a lot of politicians. They'll understand, okay, fine. Look,
they have their own roots, for example.
Well, exactly. I mean, Brussels is very white, so there's not that many. But yeah, I mean, there will be, you know, some French and some German politicians who have migration backgrounds, or Dutch even. And it is about protecting those communities as well. And look, it's an argument we can use. Big Tobacco cannot use it for their products, you know. So again, makes us somewhat more unique because we do have legitimate stories to tell.
Let's don't speak about what happens if we lose.
No,
we will certainly win. We have to.
We can win.
And how do you plan as an association to involve and engage with hookah businesses owners, employees, and consumers? In defending hookah sector, except of this public consultation?
Okay,
like
just
for
in
the
general.
Future. Yeah, in general.
Well, I guess, look, it's the mailing list that I have from ESCA. I do regulatory updates so as to kind of keep engaged with members.
So mailing?
Yeah, mailing. People don't really read emails. I mean, I definitely don't read a lot of emails.
I read it.
Okay, well, good. I'm really
month.
glad.
It's a newsletter.
Yeah. I mean, again, not the most sophisticated, but it has the important information, and that's the main thing. Look, on social media as well, LinkedIn in particular, I find is a good outlet because obviously a lot of businesses have LinkedIn pages, and it's also good from a political perspective, Twitter as well. But, you know, Instagram is great for getting messages out there and engaging with the community, but more so from a grassroots perspective. So, you know, that's where the shisha consumers are involved. But then for engaging businesses and mobilizing businesses, the likes of Shisha Messe in Frankfurt or Sevilla, like those places, or now the Shisha Messe have the Shisha Summit in Zurich. Okay, this year was the first year, but hopefully that will continue. So those are great events for getting the community together, speaking about the challenges we're facing, and then working towards one goal.
Were people scared during
Zurich?
During Zurich?
They were, yeah. They were scared. But look, everyone should be a little bit scared, because if we do nothing, it's like I said, that's why we have the same packaging requirements and same descriptor restrictions as cigarettes, because no one spoke for the shisha community before. So politicians didn't understand the product. So I understand why it was captured, but now we do have a voice, so there's no excuse. We absolutely should be getting what we want.
It's great to hear that. What are your thoughts on emerging trend of alternative products like nicotine pouches, vapes, ends, and stuff like that? Are they the reason for banning flavors as well? I mean, I think... Because it's not easy for the governments to catching up with new products and prepare legislation.
Yeah, so look, on one hand, I think flavors would always be a target for shisha just because, I mean, they see it as very attractive to young people, and they've pretty much regulated all other tobacco products to within an inch of their life. So there's not much left for them to regulate from a tobacco perspective. So I do think there would be some focus, but I think the flavor side of e-cigarettes in particular has highlighted the attractiveness of flavors holistically. So I think it has kind of shone more of a light on the shisha sector as a result of how much attention and focus their products are now getting. So I do, they've definitely contributed to a higher likelihood of a flavour ban, because it was under the legislation where they were banning flavours for e-cigarettes in Denmark that they tried to capture shisha as well. So it's an easy opportunity for them to just do it all.
Meh.
Yeah.
Okay, in the end, what do you believe are the key opportunities for innovation and growth in our industry, and how could ESCA help that?
I mean, look, with regulation, I always see regulation is obviously not a good thing, but with regulation actually can come impetus to innovate. So if you find that there are going to be particular restrictions on product or device, it does push people to innovate in a way that actually can.
For example, Okla?
Yeah, so Hookah, for example.
Hookah?
It's Hookah. Kind of like hookah, but Hookah. So
you can present it. No
so Air launched, it's a cleaner way of consuming shisha. We've launched it in the United Arab Emirates so far. And I mean, it's a really cool device. It's extremely slick. It's almost like Apple has produced it. It's like the Nespresso of shisha. And you've got the pods, and so there's no charcoal, and it's a cleaner way of consuming shisha. So that's hugely innovative. And hopefully, you know, I like the fact that we can still maintain tradition, but have a modern twist. So that's the kind of innovation that I do see in the sector. It's becoming cleaner in that respect from a health perspective. But even with regulations that, you know, might ban certain flavors or ingredients, then you have to innovate to find something that is just as good for the consumer. I do think the consumer can benefit a lot at times from restrictions on certain things that force companies to be more innovative. That's a very positive spin on regulation, but I do see there is some silver lining when it comes to regulation.
Ruth, in the end,
yes,
let's make a call to action for our audience and guests. Please tell our audience what's the right thing to do right now and what is our future about when we do not do nothing. Okay,
so look, I think you now know that there is a massive threat for a flavor ban for shisha. It is a real risk to the category. But I do think, because there is this grassroots movement, which is extremely authentic in the shisha sector, we really have to leverage that. And so right now, I urge every person here, don't just say, oh, but everyone else will do it. Don't free ride. Every person has a responsibility to respond to this public consultation. All information can be found at saveourshisha.eu. If you cannot find the information you want, you can contact me directly. My information is on the website. I will answer my phone at any time of the day if it means that you are going to respond to the public consultation. And there is power in numbers. You see that very frequently. And I think, look, I have a target of 10,000 responses to this public consultation, which is huge. But when you think of how many people consume shisha just even in the Czech Republic alone, that's not unachievable. So it's more about people being engaged enough that they will set up their account on the EU portal, they will then respond to all of the questions, and that they will then submit their comments on why shisha is important to them or their business or whatever. But 10,000 is the target, and I do believe that if everyone kind of gathers together and puts pressure on each other to respond, then we can do it. So saveourshisha.eu, just remember that.
So let's do it.
Yes, we can do it.
Ruth, thank you so much for coming to Czech Republic.
Thank you for having me.
You're amazing with all of the data and information you possess, and you just helping the whole community and the business sector
happy to do it.
To prevail. And I hope and I wish you the best of luck
thank you.
In doing that. And I also want to thank you, ESCA, European Shisha Community Alliance, right, for doing this event. Also, I want to thank SHANTI, the biggest hookah wholesaler in Czech Republic, for hosting this event. Also Kaviar, which we are sitting here right now, for doing that, and our sponsors, Theo, which is the Czech brand of tobacco, which helps us to do this kind of educational events, and also the brand of the charcoals, Cocoloco. Thank you so much for the support, and also, again, thank you so much for coming.
Problem. Thank you.
And it was a pleasure to
speak
with you.
Yeah, you too. It was great. Thank you so much,
Thank
Jakub.
you so much, Ruth.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.